Well, it's time to make another short video about the Snider Enfield. So, this one, last time I made a video, I had this one sitting soaking. Had it disassembled and had the stock soaking in linseed oil. It was really dry, very thirsty. It soaked up a lot of oil. It took about 3 weeks applying oil off and on. And it's actually quite revived now. The wood actually grew a little bit. It was that dry. But anyhow, what I wanted to talk about mostly is this is not really rare Snider, but it's somewhat unusual in that, if you can read that, it's a London Armoury rifle dated 1863. So you have the Victoria Regina crown and everything. It's a regular, it's definitely a government rifle. It has the, if you can see it, it has the government view mark and everything on it. So this one's a little bit unusual. This is why I wanted to talk about it. This is actually a conversion from a third model. Now, if you remember, if you watched my last video, I mentioned that the majority of Sniders in Canada, and I'm only talking about real Sniders here too, I'm not talking about the Nepalese rip-off versions. They're their own thing altogether. They shouldn't even be lumped in with authentic Sniders, in my opinion. Yeah, we won't even go there. But anyhow, this is a fourth model, and like I said before, the majority of Sniders we have, and the majority in British service as well, were converted from the fourth model of pattern 1853 musket, and also the late third models. So late in the third model they became interchangeable, like the manufacturing improved and so on. So London Armoury and Enfield, I think, were the only ones of the third models that you'll find converted. So this one's actually quite unusual in that it retains all three of its original Palmer barrel bands. So you don't usually see these. And it has all three, the middle one, and the upper band is really quite similar. There's I don't think there was any change at all. But you don't see these very often. These actually have, it's a captive screw, so you can unscrew the screw, and then it has this dome thing on the other side, so that it prevents the screw from coming all the way out, and you don't end up losing the screw. So that's one of the big differences. The fourth model had the Baddeley patent bands, which this is where you see the difference. You can see, like, this thing sticking out here is, it's going to grab any loose threads or anything on your uniform, and it's kind of obtrusive, so you can kind of see why they replaced them with these. And another difference that you'll see in the third model is take a look at the rear sight here. Now, when the ladder, what they call this the flap in the official nomenclature, but you can see the position of the slider differs significantly from that on the fourth model. See, they lowered it on the fourth model. So you could, I believe on the fourth model, when you raise the flap, it goes directly to 400 yards. And I think on the third model, when you raise it, it goes to 500, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, because the highest step on the base is 4. So for whatever reason, they decided some riflemen might like to have it available to use 400 with the flap standing. I don't really know that it makes that much of a difference. But this one's kind of unusual in that I think at some point the stock was changed, because it has an Enfield roundel, and as you can see it's stamped DC and a diamond for Dominion of Canada, and it's on the wrong side. According to the documents at the time, it was supposed to be placed on the left side of the butt, but well, maybe it was a left-handed person stamped this one, because it says the cheek side, so who knows. Whatever, there are all kinds of inconsistencies with Canadian Sniders. That's certainly not unusual to find it on the wrong side. But this one's also kind of interesting in that it's a Mark II 2-star, and if you can read it. So the action on this one is actually made by London Small Arms. It's matching. You can see the inspector's mark for London Small Arms has an X in it. And the barrel is also marked for London Small Arms. And the lock is London Armoury Company, which isn't unusual, because London Armoury Company, that's a whole story in itself. They provided thousands of muskets to the Confederates during the American Civil War. And they kind of folded up not long after the Civil War was over, but what remained of them became London Small Arms Company. So there is a connection there, so it kind of makes sense in a way to have a London Armoury Company lock. So everything matches London Armoury or London Small Arms, except for the stock. And I believe this is probably a 4th pattern stock. No? Yeah, it is, yeah. It is a 4th model stock, because it has the rounded side nail cups. So this is a replacement stock. But it's been together for a long, long time, so I would suspect that since the Sniders were in service in the Canadian militia for over 30 years, this one probably had a broken stock at some point, and the stock was changed. It does have little, if you take the barrel out of the stock, there's little chisel marks on the bottom of the barrel there that Canadian armourers used. So somewhere, either these were dismantled and maybe, I know they did refurbish some of them. They rebrowned them and that sort of thing. So it may be possible that they took a batch of these apart and refurbished them, and then at some point when they assembled them, they mixed up the stocks. But it is very interesting that they kept the old style Palmer bands from the 3rd model when they changed the stock. I don't even see what circumstances you would have a complete Enfield stock available to do that, but here we are. But whatever the case, it's a beautiful rifle. It's certainly worth having. It's a piece of Canadian history, just like this one that's matching. Now this one, if you look closely, you can kind of see this one was probably sanded at some point, a long, long time ago. Not very much either, very, very lightly. And this one, I don't think was ever sanded. This one's got a lot of service use showing on it. I don't know what this 15 signifies. Maybe it's this was its stand number. You quite often see that the number referred to as the rack number, but it's actually, they were referred to as the stand number. So when the Sniders were issued, each Snider was referred to as a stand of weapons. So the number of the rifle would be stenciled into the like what the Snider they were issued with the crossbelt equipment, very similar to what they had in the Crimean War, where you had a waist belt and a crossbelt for the ammo, the expense pouch, and also your bayonet and scabbard, and all of that would be numbered to the rifle. So, hence, stand of weapons. So you'll see that referred to in official documents where they'll say they're a 500 stand of Snider Enfields at such and such fort or whatever, what have you. There was a video some years ago on YouTube, I can't remember who did it, and he was saying that the equipment issued with the Snider Enfield was the Oliver pattern equipment. The Oliver pattern equipment was issued with the later Lee Enfields, and was also issued with the Ross. Was never issued with the Snider. The Snider went with the crossbelt equipment right to the bitter end. The Oliver equipment was not even compatible with the Snider. So, in 1896, 1897-ish, when the Lee Enfield became available, they started to issue different equipment with the rifles. But anyway, I just thought someone might enjoy seeing the differences between the Palmer style bands and the Baddeley band. I haven't actually seen one of these for sale in some years with a complete set of Palmer bands. You quite often, because they were in service in Canada for so long, you will find them with most often you'll see a Baddeley band on the lower band, but quite often you'll see the Palmer band in the middle band for some reason, and occasionally you'll find the Baddeley band or the Palmer band at the bottom and a Baddeley band in the middle. I don't think there was any care taken in the armories as to what went with what. But so this is actually, like I was saying, this is a Mark II 2-star, which is actually a later variant than this one, which is a Mark II star. Well, the biggest difference you'll see with that is the Mark II star has a flat-faced hammer, and the Mark II 2-star has a cupped hammer. Now, quite often online you'll see some know-it-all will come out and say, oh, these were recycled percussion hammers, that's why they're hollow. Oh, no, when they made these, when they converted these from muzzle loaders to breech loaders, they had to cut about that much of the hammer off. And the original conversion, I believe, was flat, like this one. So that would have been the Mark I and the Mark I star. And the Mark II 2-star, which I believe is basically identical to the Mark I star, except they're newly made and not converted from the earlier Mark. And then I think it was the Mark V cartridge that wasn't a very good cartridge. It would come apart and then the gas would blow out and flip the breech block open. So the interim solution to that was the Mark II 2-star, where they hollowed the hammer out. And there's supposed to be a change to the shape of the breech block and also to the extractor, but you'd have to have pretty precise instruments to measure the change. They look essentially identical in my opinion. But that's the major difference, and then that wasn't required when they went to the Mark III with the so-called positive lock. So they went back to a flat-faced hammer. And, because these were in service for so long in Canada, and they went through the armories multiple times. Some of them got completely refurbished in the armory, like rebrowned, and the stock re-oiled and that sort of thing. It's not really unusual to find the wrong lock on a rifle, like the wrong hammer, or parts mixed up or anything. In American collectors in particular, they probably would shy away from this because of the Enfield rondelle and the London Armoury lock, but you have to realize that these things were in service for so long, parts broke, they got overhauled. Yeah, they were considered interchangeable, like the parts were considered to be interchangeable, so, your average Canadian armourer in 1875 isn't really going to give a care whether he's put a Enfield stock on a London Armoury lock or whatever. And oddly enough, too, it still has the original square-headed ramrod or cleaning rod. I don't know what the thinking was behind that when they made the muzzle loaders into Sniders. They actually lightened the complete rod and then squared the end off. And then later they found that squared cleaning rod was actually bad. It would scratch the bore when the soldiers were cleaning them. So they went back to a rounded head later for the Mark III. So I think actually maybe even the Mark II 2-star had originally a rounded cleaning rod. I'm not sure now. I'll have to look back in the book. But yeah, they're quite an interesting pair of muskets, these two. It's nice to have a couple. And I have the bayonets and everything. This one here is actually quite, even though it's quite beat up, the action and everything is extremely tight on this one. It's had little use, like little actual shooting, and oddly enough, the number on the cleaning rod actually matches it, which is quite unusual. And I have the bayonet and scabbard for each of them too, so it's kind of nice to have a complete set like that. And also, I wanted to talk a little bit about these bullets. Now, a lot of people make the base plugs for these out of various things. This one needs a little bit of trial and error to get the base plug the right size. This one's actually too large. You can see it will reach right into the bottom of the cavity. But what I do to make these is just soak toilet paper. This is about half of a sheet of toilet paper. Get it, you turn it into pulp, and then compress it into the base of the bullets. And then you just put the bullet base down on something like a piece of cardboard that will absorb the moisture. And when you're done, you have a perfectly formed base plug. And then all you have to do is just put a few drops of glue onto it to harden it up. I don't think you'd even have to do that, really. It's like these are actually pretty hard as they are, so I think you could probably utilize it just as it comes out of the bullet. So yeah, that's your solution. There's a number of different ways to do it that you find online. Some people use a Bondo. There's also a product I think they call Sculpey. Some people use hay clay. Some people actually, there's actually a mold that you can buy to make these base plugs, and then you bake them in the oven. But some people cut down golf tees. Some use little wooden furniture plugs. But this is probably the most economical and simplest way to make them. It works quite well. I used to do this a long time ago, but I used the really cheap toilet paper. It seemed to be sturdier when it was dry. I think this is Purex or something. But something to consider if you're going to go this route. I strongly encourage using this type of bullet. Not to knock the people that use the solid base bullet, but I've discussed before. I was just reading a discussion last night that this was stupid to use a bullet like this because it was Mickey Mouse and Why not just make a bullet that fit the rifling to begin with and not do this? But the reason that they went with that system was because even into the 20th century, rifle bores could vary quite widely, and if you had a number of Snider Enfields or pattern 1853s or whatever, even with the Martini Henry, like the Martini Henry can vary quite a bit too. But they were starting when the Martini Henry came about. The machining and everything was starting to get a little more consistent, and these mass-produced military rifles at the time, it's not unusual to find the bore varying quite a large amount. So the trick at the time was to come up with a bullet that would work in whatever your barrel was. And as I showed before with the Thomas Turner commercial rifle, there's no way that you could fire the 60 caliber bullets that people recommend now out of that. You wouldn't get it to chamber, and you're forcing something that large down the barrel too. You're going to end up with higher pressures than you really want in an ancient barrel like this. So this is a very viable alternative and cheap too. These molds don't cost a lot of money, and I haven't tried it yet, but I think I've mentioned before I've ordered the different base plug that puts a deeper cavity in, and that was the Japanese solution, because the Japanese used a lot of Sniders, and they didn't have the expensive swaging equipment that the Royal Laboratory in England had. So their solution was to cast bullets with a deeper cavity, and then they would shoot better in the Snider. But that's, this is the alternative that I go for, and I'm going to try that. And these shoot quite well. Like, I've heard this many times that these are no good. There's two keys, in my opinion, to the accuracy of using this type of bullet in the Snider. One is to use the service charge, 70 grains, slower powder, so FG, and to harden the bullet a little bit so that when it exits the muzzle, the skirts don't crack. And if you do that, these shoot quite well. I don't understand. I see constantly people saying that they used this type of bullet and they couldn't even hit the paper at 50 yards and not even hit the target stand. And that's never been my experience at all. I don't know. I just honestly don't know what these guys are doing wrong. Maybe it's just their shooting. I don't know. Whatever the case, like I said, that has never been my experience with the Snider. The only one that I had that shot that badly actually was the using a solid base bullet, and it was a 590 solid base bullet, and because it was made from Lee mold blocks, it got so thin that the mold warped, and it was actually casting them with it was a base pour mold, so the base was actually crooked on them. But that was with the solid base, and even that I was able to hit the target at 50 yards when I tried the gun out, but the bullets were flying everywhere. But my philosophy on shooting these has always been to try to replicate the surface load, so that it follows the sights, at least as far as you can make it do it. And the sights weren't necessarily right on. You'd have to learn each individual rifle back in those days to figure out exactly where they shot. But for most military purposes, the graduations were okay. But once you get out to longer range and everything there, it's nice to have something that's at least reasonably close to where the sights are. And there seems to be a real obsession among particularly American shooters and Canadians alike, that everything has to be shot at 100 yards, period. I mean, they people go to great lengths. They build extra front sights to make the thing shoot at 100 yards, and they tailor their loads specifically for 100 yards and so on. And, if all you have is 100-yard range, I guess that makes sense, but these are a lot of fun to shoot at longer distances. And, why would you want to make something that hits the target at 100 yards, then you have the opportunity to shoot at 400 someday? And that was my experience with the Rapine trash can bullet. It was really accurate, but you had to put the sight all the way up to 400 in order to hit at 200. It was like basically the trajectory of a mortar. So that's why I moved to this style of bullet, because it was easier to get something that matched the sight. But the Snider beyond 600 yards is really, it becomes an area weapon at that point, I think. Even at 600, you could make something hot for an enemy at 600 yards, shooting at an individual. But actually hitting him would be more a matter of luck. But you have to remember, you're not talking about a guy running around like Rambo or Audie Murphy or something as a one-man army taking on the enemy. You were part of a unit, and you'd have all the other rifles of the unit shooting at whomever was shooting at you, so the odds of actually hitting the enemy at that distance go up significantly when you take that into consideration. Anyway, that's about it for today. I just thought y'all would be appreciative of seeing the difference between the Mark III and a third pattern and a fourth pattern Enfield, and the Snider conversion. Any questions or anything, just leave a comment for me. I'll try to answer it.